The clink of a wine glass can sound like a death knell. I remember the cold crawling up my spine, the way my fingers clenched the linen napkin in my lap. 30 years, and he looked at me like I was a stranger as he raised his glass, not to me but to her. That was the moment something inside me broke, and something else took its place. If you've ever given your life to someone who thought they could erase you with a smile, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from. You'll want to see how this ends. They always dim the lights in expensive restaurants. Maybe it's to make you forget the prices on the menu, or maybe it's to make betrayal easier to swallow. I was staring at the candle flickering between us when he lifted his glass. Mark, my husband, my partner, my entire goddamn life for the past 30 years. To new beginnings, he said, smiling that smug smile he's always had only. I hadn't recognized it for what it was before. That smile used to mean love, safety, home. Now it meant war. Erin, sitting just a little too close to him, let out a soft laugh and reached for her water. Her fingers brushed his arm like it was second nature. I noticed the way she looked at him, and how her other hand rested protectively over her stomach. I'm pregnant, she said, her eyes shining. There was a pause. Not in the room. The waiter was still pouring wine. A couple nearby was laughing, but inside me, something twisted so hard it felt like it was being wrung dry. Pregnant. Mark didn't look at me, not once. His eyes stayed locked on Erin, proud and pleased, like he'd just won something. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, instead slow and small. The kind of smile that takes effort when your hands are shaking under the table. Because I already knew. I knew about the bank transfers, the business dinners that turned into hotel reservations, the way she started calling him M in text messages I wasn't meant to see. I knew, and I'd spent the last 6 weeks preparing. I lifted my glass to 2 new beginnings, I said softly, my voice calm, steady, and laced with venom. That's when Mark finally looked at me. The smugness faded just a little when our eyes met. I emptied the joint accounts this morning, I said, still smiling, froze the business assets, and filed for divorce. You could hear a pin drop. The waiter blinked. Erin's mouth fell open, like a fish gasping for air, and Mark, for the first time in decades, looked genuinely, undeniably confused. I hope you both enjoy your new beginning, I added, placing my napkin neatly on the table. Then I stood. I remember every step I took away from that table. The sound of my heels against the marble, the hostess staring as I passed, the smell of marinara hanging in the air, the small stain on the carpet near the entrance right where I'd stood the year before, waiting for him to arrive late to our anniversary dinner. Again, thought it's strange what your mind holds. Onto I walked out into the night, not as a woman falling apart, but as one finally waking up, and behind me, for once, Mark was the one left explaining. I didn't go home, not the one we shared. I had a plan, a checklist. I wasn't Helen Carter anymore, the woman who swallowed every insult, every dismissal, every "you just don't understand the business, sweetheart." That Helen died the moment Erin touched her stomach, and called it a miracle. This Helen was done waiting quietly while others decided her worth. The game had started, and I'd just made the first move. The silence in the car was suffocating, not because there was noise, but because there wasn't. Every inch of that black leather interior reminded me of Mark, of us, of who I used to be. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My knuckles turned pale. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, from rage, from 30 years of swallowing words I should have screamed. 30 years. I remembered the day we moved into our house in Pasadena, the way the morning sun hit the porch, the smell of fresh paint in the kitchen. I made coffee in a machine we couldn't afford. Mark kissed my cheek and said, "One day this place will be full of memories." He wasn't wrong. They just weren't mine. I gave him everything. I gave up my dreams to build his. I was a damn good interior designer. I had clients. One of my projects was even featured in Sunset magazine. But Mark said his business needed focus. "You're the rock," he told me. "You keep everything running." And I did. Until I finally stopped, so I did. I ran the books before we could afford an accountant. I hosted the clients, smiled through endless dinners where I was introduced as Mark's wife and nothing more. And I believed that was love. I believed it because I had to. Because if it wasn't love, then what the hell had all of this been for? The week after our 10th anniversary, I miscarried. I never told anyone, not even him. He was away on business, and I told myself there was no point in burdening him with something that was already gone. So I carried that alone, like I carried so much else. Just another weight added to a house, a marriage, a life he barely showed up for. I pulled into a motel just outside Glendale. Nothing fancy, clean, efficient, anonymous. I paid in cash that morning. The clerk didn't even look up when I asked for the key. Good. Inside the room. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the shaking move through me. My legs felt weak, like jelly. My mouth was dry. My heart was pounding like I'd just escaped a burning building because, in a way, I had. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. Missed calls from Mark. I didn't answer. I wouldn't, not tonight. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I'd prepared, labeled neatly in black marker, Contingency Plan HC. Inside were bank statements, asset transfer forms, the revocation of power of attorney, business contracts bearing my signature, and clauses he'd never bothered to read. I'd written those myself. That's the funny thing about being the silent partner no one notices when you're the one holding the pen. I opened my laptop and checked the wire transfer. Again, clean. Perfectly timed. The business accounts were frozen under the emergency fraud clause I'd activated with the bank that morning. By tomorrow, Mark would wake up to an empire stuck in place, untouchable, useless to him without me. I stared at the screen, but I wasn't really seeing it. My mind drifted back to the restaurant, Erin's smug little smile, the way she rubbed her belly like it was some kind of trophy. My stomach turned. She was barely older than our goddaughter. Hell, she was our GODDAUGHTR. And then the memory hit me like a freight train. Erin's 6th birthday. She'd been painfully shy, hiding behind her mother's skirt. Mark had crouched down, handed her a pink teddy bear, and said, "She looks just like you did at that age, Helen." I remembered laughing, thinking it was sweet. Now that sentence tasted like bile in the back of my throat. My head began to throb. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared up at the ceiling, one of those ugly motel ceilings, bumpy like dried toothpaste. But at least it was mine. This room, this moment, this choice. I was alone. But for the first time in decades, that didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like power. The next move would take courage. I needed to dig deeper into the finances, into Erin, into that contract I'd found with her name on it from 15 years ago. There was more beneath the surface. I could feel it. And I wasn't stopping until I uncovered every filthy secret Mark Carter had buried. He thought I'd leave quietly. He had no idea who I'd become, was never the type to snoop, or at least that's what I told myself every time I ignored the gut feeling, every time I shoved aside the discomfort gnawing at the edges of my sanity. But now, I moved like a woman with nothing left to lose, because I didn't single quotes. It was early morning when I unlocked the storage unit. Mark, never thought I'd remember it. One of those anonymous cubes on the edge of town, bare, fluorescent lit, silent except for the occasional rattle of distant pipes. The code hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. He never imagined I'd be the one standing there. The lock turned with a dry metallic click. Inside were boxers, file drawers, a spare office chair with one leg taped together. Mark always called it overflow, a dumping ground for old invoices and manuals. But I knew better now. I pulled on gloves. I'd watched enough crime shows in the background while folding laundry to know always wear gloves. Not for crime, for distance, for control. The first few boxes were useless. Old tax folders, client intake forms, outdated brochures. But the fourth box down was different. Newer folders, labeled in Erin's handwriting, round, bubbly letters, little hearts over her E's. Of course she did. I opened one marked Consulting. Inside were copies of wire transfers, not from the business, from a personal account I didn't recognize. Payments made to her, thousands of dollars, every month, regular, predictable, each one signed by Mark. I took a photo with my phone, then another, and another. I kept digging, and that's when I found it buried inside a plain manila envelope with no label. A contract, dated August. A consulting agreement for Erin Wallace, stating she would advise on branding and investor relations. It looked official enough at first glance, but then I saw the clause, one very specific clause. In the event of dissolution of the firm or incapacitation of a founding partner, Ms. Wallace will be entitled to a guaranteed percentage equity stake. My blood went cold. 30%. That clause wasn't in any version I had drafted, not one. And I would have remembered. I stared at the signature block. Helen Carter Mark Carter, CEO, Aaron Wallace, consultant. Except my name had been forged. Sloppily. The loop in the H was wrong. The angle of the C too sharp. I stepped back. My hands were slick with sweat inside the gloves. My breathing turned shallow and fast. The sound of blood rushing in my ears drowning out everything else. 15 years ago. 15 years ago, Mark gave that girl barely out of college a place in our company, in our lives, not as some careless affair. He was building a future with her. Back when I was still trying to get pregnant, I dropped to the cold, concrete floor. My knees hit hard, pain shooting up my spine. I didn't care, because that was when the final piece slid into place. He had never chosen me, not once. He tolerated me. Used me, kept me because I was useful, because I played my role and never looked too closely. And now that I was older, less appealing by his standards, easier to discard, he thought I'd disappear quietly, like an old piece of furniture. But I wasn't furniture. I was fire. I stood, gathered the documents I needed, and walked out. The city was still asleep. As I drove back toward the motel, the weight of the folder on my lap felt like a weapon. And in a way, it was the kind that cuts quietly, strategically, without leaving. Fingerprints. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail. A new message. I didn't open it. Not yet. There was more to uncover. More threads to pull. But now for the first time, had one that led straight to the core of the rot. Mark's world was built on lies, and I was going to be the woman who tore it all down. The first time I saw Erin Wallace, she had chocolate on her face and a ribbon in her hair. She was 6. Maybe 7, shy. Her mother, Karen, was one of those effortlessly charming women, laughing a little too loudly, always touching your arm when she spoke. Mark said they were old college friends. She'd moved to Pasadena after a bad breakup and needed help settling in. Of course we helped. That's what good people do, right? And Erin Ron was sweet, quiet. She sat on our couch flipping through my design magazines, asking if she could have a house like that someday. I made her cocoa, took her school shopping when Karen got the flu. She called me Aunt Helen, even though we weren't related. I loved that child who looked so much like me when I was her age, too much. Now that I think about it, the soft brown curls, the gap in her front teeth, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed. I should have seen it. I should have seen it, but I didn't. Not until I was sitting in my car outside the county clerk's office, staring at a copy of Erin's birth certificate I'd pulled after 3 hours of bureaucracy and polite lies. Mother, Karen Wallace. Father, Mark Edward Carter. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, my nails digging into the steering wheel, breathing in through my nose the way I'd learned years ago in Lama's class I'd taken alone. Mark had been busy that day, busy building another family. I laughed, then a sharp, bitter sound that filled the car, a sound that didn't belong to the woman I used to be. That Helen, the one who trusted, who believed, who bent without breaking, was already gone. This was a funeral now, and I wasn't mourning my marriage anymore. I was mourning myself. My entire adult life had been wrapped around a lie with dimples, a giggle, and big brown eyes. I raised my husband's daughter not out of forgiveness or redemption, but out of ignorance, out of faith. Mark let me hold that girl in my arms, let me buy her birthday gifts, let me believe we were doing something good. All the while, he was laughing behind my back. And Erin, she knew. I see it clearly now. The looks, the subtle, condescending tone she used with me in meetings once she joined the business, the way she said my name Helen like it was a placeholder, not a person. She'd been playing along, waiting in the wings, watching me give up my life piece by piece and never saying a word. And now she was pregnant with the second child Mark never gave me. That night, I drove to my sister's house. Linda didn't ask questions. She opened the door, poured me a glass of wine, and let me collapse onto her couch. She knew something was coming. She always did. I need to show you something, I told her. I spread the documents across her dining table, the forged contract, the bank transfers, the birth certificate. She stared at them in silence, her jaw tight. This is criminal, she finally whispered. I shook my head. It's Mark. That's worse. No one ever believes you when it's someone like him. We sat there quietly. The clock ticked. Her dog snored at our feet. Then Linda looked me straight in the eye. So what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? Not if I would do something, but what. I was done surviving. Now I would start strategizing. I leaned back in the chair and smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't warm. It was cold, measured. I'm going to take everything he built, I said, and make him watch me do it, because love didn't destroy me. He did. And now I would be the one writing the ending. You don't really know yourself until you decide to burn everything down. The morning I filed the paperwork, the sky over Pasadena was impossibly blue, one of those crisp, cloudless California days that feels like it's daring you to stay angry. I walked into the courthouse at 8 a.m., heels clicking against tile, folder in hand, not a single strand of hair out of place. People glanced at me and saw someone's assistant, a retiree, maybe a judge's wife. No one saw the grenade I was carrying. Divorce petition, Helen Carter versus Mark Edward Carter. Emergency asset freeze application, signed and notarized. Corporate injunction under clause 1(4)(c) of the founding agreement. His signature was right, there smug as ever. I had the power, I just needed to use it. The clerk didn't blink. She stamped the documents, checked my ID, handed me a receipt, and, just like that, my 30-year marriage began to unravel, one legal stamp at a time. I walked out into the sunlight, my heart pounding not from fear, but from freedom. Back at the motel, I made 2 calls. First, the bank. I confirmed the freeze on our joint accounts, the business accounts, and the executive card I knew Erin had been using for her company dinners. Second, Mark's lawyer. I didn't ask to speak to him. I left a message. This is Helen Carter. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I've filed for divorce and enacted clause 1(4)(c). Please advise your client to retain separate counsel. Oh, and tell him to check his wallet. It'll feel lighter. Click. Then I waited. It didn't take long. At 1:07, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered and said nothing. Helen's voice. God, that voice. I used to fall asleep to it, warm beside him in our bed. Now it sounded like static. Where the hell are you? He snapped. I smiled. Someplace where I don't have to look at you. You froze the accounts. What are you thinking? Are you having some kind of breakdown? No, Mark. I'm finally having a breakthrough. Silence. I pictured him pacing, running a hand through his thinning hair, staring at the big house we built together, the house I designed, painted, filled with laughter, pain, and long silences. I have a child on the way, he hissed, like it was a threat. I almost laughed. Then I suggest you figure out how to support her, because the money isn't coming from me. You can't do this. You don't know what you're doing. That was it. I lowered my voice. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking back my life. Every dollar, every shred of dignity, every hour I spent shrinking so you could shine. Jesus, Helen, stop. No. You don't get to talk now. You had 30 years. I was loyal. I was quiet. I gave up everything. You gave me lies. You made me raise your child while you laughed behind my back. And now, I said softly, you're going to learn what happens when the woman you underestimated decides she's done. I hung up. And I didn't cry. I packed up my things from the motel and moved into a short-term rental in Glendale. Something simple, clean lines, sunlight, no memories attached to the walls. I bought new sheets, new towels, a coffee machine that brewed just 1 cup. Then I sat on the floor with a glass of wine and watched the sky shift from gold to dark, like someone had pulled a curtain over the world. And I breathed. Not shallow, not anxious. Free. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't have to ask anyone what they wanted for dinner. I didn't have to worry about my tone at some business function or tiptoe around a man whose ego filled every room. That night, I slept like a woman who had just burned her prison to the ground. And when I woke up, I was already thinking about my next move. The first headline hit 2 days later. Pasadena power couple in shock, divorce, financial freeze raises eyebrows. I was brushing my teeth when I saw it. The toothpaste foamed in my mouth, bitter and minty as I stared at my face on the screen, grainy, cropped from some charity gala years ago. Me standing beside Mark, smiling, holding a champagne glass. I spit. The article was polite at first, measured, speculative, but the phrase unconfirmed allegations of financial misconduct practically jumped off the page. That was all it took. The floodgates opened. By noon, 5 more outlets had picked it up. By evening, a local podcast rushed out an emergency episode with a clickbait title, The Fall of Mark Carter, Divorce, Deceit, and a Mysterious Frozen Fortune. They had no idea. Not yet, but they would. I watched it all unfold from my rental. wrapped in a navy robe, sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug that felt more honest than any of the expensive crystal I used to wash by hand. The comments were brutal, speculative, cruel, most of them aimed at me. She finally snapped. She's jealous. She's bitter because the new girl's younger. I closed the laptop. That it wasn't worth it. I'd lived under the weight of other people's opinions long enough. Now they could think whatever they wanted while I handled the facts. I wasn't bitter. I was brilliant. And the best part, they hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. That came later when someone I don't know who, and I don't care, leaked the internal memos, emails, and bank records. It was all there. Mark's double billing, the quiet payments, expenses labeled consulting that led straight to Aaron's personal Venmo, a Manhattan suite paid for with business funds, 2 first-class flights booked under fake client names, of them hers. The documents were anonymously sent to a journalist I'd quietly contacted 2 weeks earlier. Her name was Danielle Griggs, local, sharp, no nonsense. I handed her the truth in a tidy envelope. She turned it into fire. The headline that changed everything dropped on a Thursday morning. Inside the Empire, Mark Carter's web of lies and the woman who brought him down. This time, the photo was just me, standing alone outside the courthouse, sunglasses on, chin lifted. And the public flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't the crazy wife. I was the hero. The woman who saw through the lies, the woman who fought back, the woman who did what no one else dared. Former employees started coming forward. Quiet messages turned into public statements. He made me sign NDA. He took credit for everything Helen designed. She ran that company, not him. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not yet, but the tide had turned. Mark tried to fight it. Of course he did. He appeared on camera with a tired press release and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She's unstable, Mark said. She's retaliating. That night, I got a message from an old friend I hadn't heard from in years. Unstable? You mean unshakable? I'm so proud of you. Then, another. Finally, someone shut that arrogant bastard down. Erin vanished from social media within hours. Her LinkedIn quietly changed to seeking new opportunities. Friends deleted old posts. Her influencer account disappeared. I almost felt bad, almost then. I remembered her at the dinner table, hand resting on her belly, eyes glittering, that little smirk curling at the corner of her mouth. She knew, she always knew, and she wanted me to sit there, to accept it, to fade quietly while they built their new beginning. No, not this time. They didn't get to write the ending. I did, and I was just getting started. Silence can be the loudest sound in the world. I hadn't spoken to Mark since the call after the asset freeze. He didn't try again. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. But the world was anything but quiet. 3 weeks after Danielle's expose, the real flood began. The first email came from a woman named Lisa Hartman. Subject line: I used to work for him. 2. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 30-2. Receptionists. Interns, accountants, women, men, people who had left Carter & Co. with shame stuck in their throats and silence pressed to their lips. Until now, they'd been mocked, gaslit, undermined, passed over for promotions after doing the work for everyone else. One woman had her designs sold to a client under Mark's name. Another saw Erin wearing a necklace her grandmother had made, the same one she'd lost during a company retreat. Story after story. Abuse didn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it came with a smile and a bonus check that was always less than promised. Danielle wanted to run a follow-up piece. This time, she didn't want anonymous sources. She wanted me. No camera, I told her. Not yet, she agreed. We met at a cafe in Silver Lake, small enough to disappear into. She wore jeans and a leather jacket. I wore the calm of a woman who had walked through fire barefoot. Her recorder sat between us. Why now? She asked. I watched the steam rise from my tea. Earl Grey, no sugar. Because I was tired of being erased, I said. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything except the things I still needed to keep close. Some knives stay sharper when they're hidden. When the second article dropped, it didn't just trend out, it roared. Helen Carter speaks. A legacy built on silence and the woman who refused to stay quiet this time. The photo showed me walking into the courthouse alone. No sunglasses. No fear. I was done hiding. That week, I got an email from a woman named Ava Clean, lawyer, Harvard Fierce. She'd been following my story, and she had an idea. We start a foundation, she said, for women rebuilding their lives after financial and emotional abuse. We call it the Carter Clause, and we make sure no woman ever signs her name away again without knowing exactly what it means. I said yes without hesitation. We launched with a GoFundMe that hit its goal in hours. CBS called, then NPR, then someone from Netflix left a voicemail. I still haven't returned. Bach responded with a pathetic attempt at a countersuit. Defamation, emotional distress, loss of business reputation. The judge tossed it out in under 10 minutes. Turns out when you have proofing contracts, signatures, it's hard to argue with the truth. His last ally, a corporate partner named Greg Toiver, released a public statement distancing himself from Mr. Carter's conduct. Translation: he saw the ship sinking and grabbed the last lifeboat. Aaron tried to resurface with a tweet about healing and protecting her peace. It was ratioed into oblivion. People had seen enough, heard enough. And now they were listening to me, not the wife, not the accessory, not the shadow in the room. Me. Helen Carter. The woman no one saw coming, the woman who would never be invisible again. She died believing I would be taken care of. Eleanor Carter, Mark's mother, wasn't perfect, but she treated me with something close to affection, the old school, apron-wearing kind. She sent handwritten birthday cards every year, even when Mark forgot. She taught me how to make her lemon bars from scratch, called me her girl, hugged me tighter than my own mother ever had. She died 2 months before the divorce. Mark said she left everything to him, to keep things simple. I didn't question it then. I was still clinging to scraps of trust, still hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. The call came from her attorney, Mr. Arlo Finch, a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite and had never once considered smiling. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," he said, then paused. "I suppose it's Ms. now." "Just Helen," I told him. He hesitated. "There's something you should see. I'm sending you the original will and the amended version Mark brought in 6 weeks before Eleanor's passing." I sat in my new apartment, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea that had long gone cold. Read both documents side by side. The original left a portion of her estate to me, a vacation cottage in Mendocino, her jewelry, her Buick Riviera, the one she never let Mark touch. The amendment left everything to Mark. Every last cent, signed by Eleanor in shaky cursive that didn't match any of her previous signatures. Mark had power of attorney, medical, financial, had been in the hospital room the day before she died. She was lucid, clear. She squeezed my hand and told me she was proud of me. "You were always the steady one, Helen," she said, and that's when I understood. He didn't just betray me. He rewrote history, and I was done letting anyone do that ever again. He never deserved you. She hugged me, and 6 weeks before that moment, he had erased me. I dropped the papers. I couldn't breathe. How do you mourn someone twice? First when they died, then when you realized they were used against you. I called Arlo. "This signature," I said. "You've seen it. You know it isn't hers." Silence. "Then, I can't say that officially," he said, carefully. "But, I agree with you. Can anything be done?" A pause. Longer this time. "No, not now. Not without years of litigation, and with the statute of limitations, and Mark's legal protections." His voice trailed off. "I'm sorry." I hung up, and I screamed. A deep, guttural sound I didn't know I was capable of. It ripped through the walls of my small apartment. My voice cracked halfway through. I slid down to the floor and cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not over Mark, not over money, over Eleanor. She loved me, and he took that, too. But something changed that night, something vital. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about justice, about truth, about every woman who has been erased, silenced, overwritten by a man with a louder voice and a better tailor. I stood up. My face was swollen, my heart ached, but my mind was clear. Mark had taken almost everything, but I still had my voice, and now I was going to use it to make sure no one else ever lost theirs again. Justice doesn't arrive in a blaze of glory. It comes in paperwork, in deadlines, in the cold, precise language of people who've seen too many lies to flinch anymore. It was a Tuesday when I walked into the office of Cheryl Kim, a forensic accountant, known for untangling financial knots like they were shoelaces. Her desk was spotless, her blouse crisp. She didn't ask if I wanted water. She asked for evidence. I handed her 2 flash drives and a folder labeled Personal Hell, Volume 1, Mark Carter. I said, "Let's see what he's really worth." She started working before I finished the sentence. For weeks, we dug quietly, carefully. Shell companies, misreported earnings, undisclosed payments disguised as charitable donations, personal expenses charged to corporate accounts, luxury hotel stays, jewelry, a double espresso massage chair for Aaron's Manhattan condo. He thought I wouldn't notice. He forgot I used to balance those books. Cheryl's final report arrived like a bomb sealed inside a manila envelope. I sent it to the IRS. No note, no drama. 3 weeks later, Mark Carter received a federal audit notice. The silence that followed was exquisite. Then came the headlines. Feds launch probe into Carter & Co. Fraud allegations surface. From boardroom to courtroom. Mark Carter under investigation. He tried to call me. Blocked. Then came the text. One sentence. We could have handled this privately. I read it twice, then deleted it privately. He slept with a woman half my age, forged my name, rewrote my life, erased me from his mother's will. There would be nothing private about this. Erin disappeared. Her influencer account vanished. The last I heard, she'd been let go after the audit froze payroll. She posted once on Instagram stories. Black background, white text. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your truth. I screenshotted it, because this was my truth. I had been a ghost in my own life. Now, I was the storm. Clients pulled out, speaking engagements were cancelled, investors fled, his name became poison in email threads, and me, I was still angry, still hollow in places, still waking in the night remembering how he used to rest his hand on the small of my back in public, like I was something he owned, but I was also standing taller. I drank my coffee slower, walked down the street like I belonged there, because I did. One afternoon, I sat in a bookstore flipping through a memoir by a woman who'd left her husband after 35 years. The last line read, "They said I was broken, but they didn't realize I was breaking free." I closed the book and smiled. I wasn't broken, not anymore. And the man who thought he could break me, he was the one being slowly, methodically dismantled, one truth at a time. Revenge is loud. Freedom is quiet. It was a Tuesday. No headlines, no lawsuits, no leaks. Just the hum of my neighbor's lawnmower and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting through my window. I sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, solid oak, bought with my money, chosen for no one's taste but mine. The sunlight hit it just right. For a moment, everything felt still, and that's when it finally landed. It was over. Not in some dramatic courtroom gavel way, but in the quiet realization that I no longer woke up wondering where he was. I wasn't scrolling through articles to see if my name had been dragged through the mud again. There was no Aaron posting beach photos, no Mark playing the victim, no calls from lawyers. Just silence, and I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either, not yet, but I was learning how to live inside it. That afternoon, I walked down to the little cafe on the corner, the kind of place I used to skip. Too small, too casual. Mark hated anything without valet parking and overpriced espresso, but now, it was mine. The barista, young guy with tired eyes and a kind smile, looked up and said, "You're Helen, right?" I hesitated. "Yes." He handed me my latte. "You're kind of a legend around here." I didn't know what to say. As I turned to leave, a woman at the corner table waved me over. Late 40s, curly hair streaked with gray, fingers flying across a laptop. "Sorry," she said. "I don't mean to intrude, but I'm with the Reclaim Project. We help women restart after divorce, financial abuse, things like that." She paused, then smiled. "We've been following your story. Would you ever consider speaking at one of our events?" My mouth went dry. I had nothing prepared, no speech, no platform, no fake smile ready to wear. And for once, I didn't need one. I just said yes, not for them, not for some performance, for me, because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Mark, or Aaron, or even Eleanor's will. It became about the version of me who never had a voice, the woman who stayed quiet so people would like her, who made herself smaller so others could shine, who stood in the background of every photo of her own life. Not anymore. I walked home with a flyer in my purse and a strange new feeling growing in my chest. Not anger, not grief. Purpose. That night, I opened my laptop. I didn't check the news. I didn't Google Mark. I opened a blank document and titled it, "The Woman You Forgot to Fear," and I started typing. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't telling someone else's story. I was finally telling mine. The first time I held my book in my hands, I cried. Not a dramatic, movie scene cry. No music, no one holding me. Just quiet, warm tears slipping down my cheeks in the middle of my living room. A dusty beam of afternoon light cutting across the floor. The title gleamed in black serif font. The Woman No One Saw by Helen Carter. 267 pages of pain, clarity, and cold truth. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a warning, a mirror, a flare in the dark for every woman who had ever been told to calm down, let it go, or be grateful. I wrote it over 6 brutal months, late nights, early mornings. Every chapter dragged buried pieces of me into the light. Some I didn't even know were there. I bled into those pages, and I refused to clean it up. The day it hit Amazon, it sold out in 3 hours. Then the emails started coming, from strangers, from survivors, from daughters who watched their mothers disappear, from women who realized they had become their mothers, from men, too quiet, ashamed, repentant. Your book saved my sister. I left him, I took my kids, and I left. You made me believe in myself again. Mark sent a cease and desist within hours. His lawyer claimed character defamation, said I misrepresented events, weaponized emotional narrative, and caused irreparable damage to his reputation. My response. I posted the letter on my website with a single-line caption. Here's what silence looks like when it's scared. The public turned feral. The backlash was swift. The hashtag We See Helen trended for 3 days. I didn't ask for it. I didn't organize it. It found me. And Erin. She tried one last grab for some rambling blog posts about grief, being misled, and finding herself in an impossible situation. It was deleted within the hour. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Mark dropped the lawsuit quietly, without comment. His law firm removed his name from the masthead. His clients vanished. He still had money, but no one wanted to sit next to him anymore. At one event, a woman approached me holding a hardcover copy of my book. Her eyes looked like they had seen too much. She handed it to me to sign, then said softly, "You didn't just survive him." And I knew exactly what she meant. You outlived his shadow. That's when I understood this was never about revenge. This was resurrection. I had taken everything he tried to erase and carved it into permanence. Not in court, not in fire, but in ink, and nothing he did after that could ever unwrite me. The Pacific in April is a strange shade of blue, deeper, moodier, the kind that feels like it could swallow you whole if you let it. I stood on the shore in Santa Monica, my toes buried in cool sand, the wind tugging gently at my scarf. It was the same date, April 10th, 31 years earlier. Mark and I had toasted our first anniversary at a small seafood place just up the road. He bought me a necklace that I later learned he charged to a company card. I wore it anyway. Today, I wore nothing but myself. No jewelry, no makeup, no performance. Just me. My phone buzzed inside my coat pocket. I didn't check it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to step out of this moment. The waves whispered as they rolled in, each one carrying away a version of me. I no longer needed the woman who apologized for speaking up, the woman who measured her worth by someone else's comfort, the woman who mistook survival for peace. She was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, clearer, steel-backed. For so long, I had lived braced for impact, waiting for the next lie, the next betrayal, the next wave to pull me under. But the storm had passed. The last I heard, Mark was consulting. A polished word for unemployed, with excuses. Erin had moved to Denver. Word was, she took the baby with her. No more designer purses, no more brand deals. Just a woman left, holding the wreckage of a castle built on someone else's foundation. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't need to. Hate keeps you tethered. And I was finally untethered. I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone. One new voicemail. "Hi Helen, this is Andrea from Beacon Publishing. We're thrilled with the sales numbers for The Woman No One Saw. We'd love to talk about a second book, maybe even a series. Let us know if you're open." I smiled, not because of the offer, because they saw me, truly saw me. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked out at the horizon. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't belong to anyone, not to a husband, not to a story, not to a legacy I never chose. I belonged to me, and the silence around me wasn't loneliness, it was peace. I turned away from the water and started walking, one steady step at a time. Whatever came next would be mine, all of it, and this time, I would write the story myself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.